He thinks he failed, which of course he did, but you know, there's a lot of that going around, ain't there?
Sometimes you make mistakes, and that's fine. After all, you're only human. You're not a genocidal purple titan who wants to save a universe by eliminating half of all life in it. Are you? That's the problem with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's not just filled with humans, so the phrase, "I'm only human," doesn't mean all that much. We don't think Peter Quill said, "I'm only half human," after he snapped on Thanos for throwing Gamora off a cliff. Speaking of that moment, it's an example we won't be including in this video because Star-Lord never really took a moment to realize that he messed up. Today, we're going to take a look at the MCU characters who messed up royally and knew it.
Two stones uptown, one stone down. Stay low, keep an eye on the clock.
What we loved most about Avengers Endgame was all the time travel shenanigans we saw Earth's mightiest heroes get themselves into. One of the more interesting moments happened when our heroes went back to New York in 2012 during the events of the first Avengers movie. And we're sure you already know Loki was the main villain of that film, doing Thanos' dirty work for him through the Mind Stone-powered scepter, but we'll have more on Thanos later. That's called foreshadowing, folks. New York in 2012 had 3 Infinity Stones, and Ant-Man and Tony Stark came up with a plan to get their hands on the Tesseract. But it didn't go quite as planned. Ant-Man shrinks himself and pulls the plug on past Tony Stark, causing him to pass out before kicking the briefcase towards present Tony Stark, disguised as a security guard. Tony grabs the briefcase the Tesseract is in before getting pummeled by the Hulk, sending the Tesseract flying out the briefcase to Loki's feet. Loki then grabs it and teleports to his Disney Plus show. The look on Tony Stark's face when he says, "We blew it," tells you everything you need to know. Luckily, they went back to the 70s and got the Tesseract anyway.
Back in the game. The world is in our hands. It's left to us, guys.
People deal with loss differently. Some like to talk through their issues, others like to keep to themselves, and others like to drink and eat until their heart's content. Like Fat Thor. We mean Thor. Just Thor. He didn't deal with the events of Avengers Infinity War very well at all, and we don't blame him. He lost his home, his hammer, his mother, his father, his brother, and his abs. So we'd really be down in the dumps if all that happened to us as well. In Infinity War, he had the chance to take Thanos down for good and gave the Mad Titan a pretty big wound before he remarked, "You should have aimed for the head." You could tell those words were replaying in Thor's mind each and every day. If he just aimed for the head, all of this would have been avoided. The decimation wouldn't have happened, and Thanos' army would have been done for. But who are we kidding? That would have just been boring. Thor finally got his revenge in Endgame when he took Thanos' head clean off his shoulders. He didn't make the same mistakes twice, and finally aimed for the head.
Avengers! Assemble.
Sticking with Avengers Endgame, the final fight scene had to be one of the most epic sequences we've ever seen in our lives. It was that good, folks. After all, there's a reason why it's the highest grossing film of all time. While we still cry every now and then thinking about the late great Tony Stark, his sacrifice was not in vain because he ended up saving the entire universe. Without him, the MCU wouldn't even exist, and we'll always love him 3000. But it was the scene that led up to his sacrifice that was a terrible mistake on Thanos' part. Thanos thought he had the Gauntlet with all 6 Infinity Stones in it, but that wasn't the case. Iron Man's nanotechnology turned him into a bit of a magician, and his smooth moves allowed him to take the stones out from under Thanos and snap his fingers to turn the Mad Titan and his army to dust. The sheer look of horror on Thanos' face as he saw Tony Stark holding the fully equipped Gauntlet was priceless. But despite the fact that he was a psychopath, we had a bit of a soft spot for the crazy purple dude.
You lose this again, I'm keeping it.
While Tony Stark laid down on the wire and sacrificed himself for the greater good, something Captain America never thought he'd do, he still had one last piece of technology that was passed on to his protege Peter Parker after he died, the Edith glasses. We all know Tony just loved acronyms, and Edith was no different. It stands for Even Dead, I'm the Hero. Well, it's better than BARF, that's for sure. While the Edith glasses 100% looked better on Quentin Beck than Peter Parker, that's not a valid reason to give them to Mysterio. You don't just hand a pair of glasses that have the power to call drones and eliminate targets at a moment's notice. That kind of power is what you keep in your back pocket to save for a rainy day. What the heck were you thinking, Peter? If you want to give them to anyone, you give them to the European Spider-Man knockoff known as Night Monkey, not Mysterio. This guy just took advantage of a nice young kid who wasn't in the right frame of mind. Shame on him. But shame on Peter for giving them to Mysterio in the first place.
We got a stowaway.
Going into Captain Marvel, comic book fans were sure of two things. The movie was going to be totally radical, and the Skrulls were going to be the bad guys. Have you ever read the Secret Invasion storyline? You know, the one where the Skrulls shapeshift into heroes and high-ranking people in S.H.I.E.L.D. and other governmental branches? The one where no one knows who to trust by the end of it because there were Skrulls all over the place. Yeah, fans expected the Skrulls to be the clear-cut bad guys in the movie, but when that turned out to not be the case, we were just as shocked as Captain Marvel. This whole time, she was led to believe that the Kree were the good guys and the Skrulls were the bad guys, when it was the other way around all along. The Kree just used her as a weapon in the war against the Skrulls. When Carol Danvers learned the truth, she was quick to help the Skrulls find their new home, which is all they really wanted. That being said, we still can't trust the Skrulls as far as we can throw them, and we know they're just up to something.
Why does somebody always have to die in this scenario?
If you were in English class right now and we asked you what the main theme of Avengers Infinity War was, you'd most likely say sacrifice. Everywhere you turned, people were risking their lives to stop the Mad Titan, and it was to no avail, because when it was all said and done, half the universe was dust in the wind. When Thanos turns to look at Gamora after being told he loves nothing, he has tears running down his face. After Gamora learns the tears are not for him, from Emperor Palpatine, we mean Red Skull, her expression suddenly changes. She even tries to stab herself, but that doesn't work out for her, and Thanos decides enough is enough and yeets her off a cliff. Never to be seen again, until past Gamora came back to the main timeline in Endgame, of course. What we're confused about more than anything is why Gamora led Thanos to Boromir in the first place. It's possible that she just wanted to laugh as he failed to collect all 6 Infinity Stones, but was she really naive enough to think that this maniac wouldn't just chuck her off a cliff? It's very odd to us.
And as you can see, I am not dead!
Saying Black Panther was a smash hit is a bit of an understatement. We think it exceeded all expectations and was easily one of the best movies of 2018. But things were far from easy for T'Challa as he ended up paying for decisions he didn't even make. His father, T'Chaka, was once the king of Wakanda himself, and he disagreed with the ideas of his brother, N'Jobu. While T'Chaka was all about keeping Wakanda private from the rest of the world, much like his son T'Challa, N'Jobu wanted Wakanda to go public and share its wealth of resources with those of African descent around the world who were being oppressed, much like his son Eric Stevens. When push came to shove, T'Chaka killed his own brother over their beliefs, leaving young Eric Stevens with no one to take care of him. As you know by now, Eric Stevens would become Eric Killmonger, and he dedicated his life to getting revenge for what happened to his father, which also involved turning T'Challa's life into a nightmare. Technically, T'Challa did nothing wrong, but he was paying for the mistakes of his father and was beyond shocked to find out the truth.
Be careful, Steve. You might not want to pull on that thread.
Sometimes it's good to keep a secret if it doesn't hurt anyone, but there are some secrets that could severely impact other people's lives, and you'd earn a massive amount of respect by telling that person the whole truth and nothing but the truth, because these types of secrets should not be kept to yourself. Ain't that right, Cap? In Captain America Civil War, Tony Stark found out the truth about his parents and who was responsible for their deaths. It turns out that it was Captain America's best friend, Bucky Barnes, who took his parents out for good. But it kinda wasn't his fault because he was still mind-controlled by Hydra and was known as the Winter Soldier. That being said, Captain America could have told Tony Stark about it earlier, don't you think? He knew he was responsible for his death of his fellow Avengers' parents, but he kept quiet and didn't say a word about it until Tony learned the truth himself. Pfft, and this guy's considered worthy enough to wield Mjolnir? That's a really big mess up for Steve Rogers, probably the worst one he's had in the MCU.
We're still friends, right?
Depends on how hard you hit me.
Superpower safety is very important. Superheroes need to know their powers, when to use them, and what the repercussions could be of using them in the wrong situation. This is what made the Hulk such a threat. He just did whatever he saw fit, but we'll talk about the Hulk later. This entry is about Vision and the careless way he uses those laser beams he can shoot out of his forehead. In Captain America Civil War, we saw an all-out battle between Team Iron Man, composed of Iron Man, obviously, War Machine, Black Widow, Black Panther, Vision, and Spider-Man, and Team Cap, composed of Captain America, duh, Hawkeye, Falcon, Bucky Barnes, Ant-Man, and Scarlet Witch. At one point in the intense fight sequence between the two teams, we saw Vision try to take down Falcon with a good old forehead laser beam. But Falcon avoided it and hit War Machine right in the chest, severely wounding Rhodey. It looked like a really serious life-changing injury in the movie, but the next thing you know, Rhodey was walking like it wasn't a problem at all in the next movie we saw him in. That's good news for Vision, who felt super guilty about the whole thing.
Are you Tony Stank?
This is Tony Stank.
Tony Stark has already made a few appearances in this video, and he has a few more to go, because this next one we're going to talk about takes the cake as the biggest mistake he's ever made. In Avengers Age of Ultron, we saw Tony Stark and Bruce Banner create what can only be described as a genocidal killbot. One that came oh so very close to annihilating the whole human race. In the comics, Ultron was created mostly by Hank Pym, but in the MCU, it was Tony Stark and Bruce Banner who nearly caused the end of the world. Sure, on the surface, it sounded like a good idea to create an all-powerful artificial intelligence, but when the robots take over, that powerful AI just wants to destroy the whole world. As you can tell, creating Ultron was beyond just a simple mess-up. It was an absolute catastrophe. What we don't get is why Stark and Banner created Ultron in the first place. Things were going great at the time, and they had to ruin everything by creating this psycho robot. When Tony gets an idea in his head, he just has to roll with it.
That up there, that's the end game.
Everyone loved Guardians of the Galaxy. Okay, maybe your third cousin twice removed doesn't like the movie, but you only see him once every few years, so it doesn't bother you much. Anyway, it was a great movie, especially because of Drax the Destroyer. He didn't say much, but when he spoke, you listened and probably laughed. After the Guardians broke out of prison, they were waiting to attend a meeting with the Collector. Of course, they didn't just sit in a waiting room until they got called in. They decided to have some fun on the head of a dead Celestial, a planet known as Nowhere. We assume it's the Las Vegas of the galaxy, since Rocket was about to earn a heck of a payday. But Drax just had to go and call Ronan the Accuser, ruining everything. We understand he was drunk at the time, but come on! You don't call your enemy who doesn't know your location to tell him to come to Nowhere because you're in the mood for a fight. It certainly wasn't his best moment, and he probably doomed an entire civilization because of it. Not cool, Drax. Not cool.
You know what keeps going through my head? Where's my sandwich?
If there's one thing Iron Man is known for, it's being a genius billionaire playboy philanthropist. Well, those are 4 things, so we might as well add a few more like narcissist and egotist. He's just that kind of guy, and he truly showed his massive ego in Iron Man 3. While he was dealing with the aftermath of a terrorist attack that landed Happy Hogan in the hospital, fearing for his life, Tony let the Mandarin know exactly where to find him. No, he didn't say Los Angeles or something vague like that. He said his full address, 10880 Malibu Point, where he has a house overlooking Point Doom. Oh, and he also said that on live TV. Clearly the Mandarin got the message very quickly and ended up blowing Tony Stark's house to smithereens. There was absolutely nothing left of it, but he was able to get himself and Pepper Potts out of that mess, even if it involved him having a barely functioning suit for the rest of the film. That being said, what in the heck was Tony thinking? Rule number 1 of life is that you don't give strangers your address, especially if they're terrorists who are armed to the teeth with deadly weapons.
Fine. I'll do it myself.
Thanos was hands down the best villain we've seen so far in the MCU, and you could make a case for him being the best villain in all of cinema, but we wouldn't go that far. After all, he made plenty of mistakes during his tyrannic reign, so he wasn't constantly making the right call. In fact, he was usually making the wrong call, like letting his minions do his dirty work for him. That's literally all he did at first. He sent Loki down to Earth with the Mind Stone-powered scepter to receive the Tesseract, but that clearly didn't work out well. He sent Ronan the Accuser to retrieve the orb, and that also didn't go well. Ronan even turned on the Mad Titan, which wasn't a smart thing to do. Then he set the Black Order to take care of the Avengers on Earth, and once he realized that wasn't going to work either, he finally graced our planet with his presence and took care of business. Why didn't he do that earlier? There's no need to delegate when you can do it yourself 10 times faster. That Thanos wasn't nearly as smart as he let on.
I have an army.
We have a Hulk.
Speaking of characters who are smart but often don't act like they are, let's talk about Loki. His whole plan in the first Avengers movie was to find a way to unleash the Hulk on the rest of the Avengers, take advantage of this distraction, and bring the Tesseract to Thanos, who we didn't know was pulling the strings until the mid-credits scene of the film. This is before Bruce Banner and the Hulk combined to make Professor Hulk or Smart Hulk. So when Bruce Banner lost it, he turned into a complete rage monster with no control over himself. This was a brilliant plan by Loki, who's known as the god of mischief for a reason, but let's just say it didn't quite go as planned. That's a trend for villains, isn't it? Come up with a brilliant plan, poorly execute said plan, lose, repeat. Loki made 2 mistakes when it came to the Hulk. He intimidated him and he underestimated him. While Loki is quite powerful, he was no match for the mean green angry machine, who showed the puny god who was boss. Loki knew right then and there that he made a huge mistake.
You must be truly desperate to come to me for help.
Sticking with Loki, we seriously wonder how anyone can trust the guy. Okay, we know he's a handsome charmer who has a way with words, but how is it possible that everyone ends up trusting this guy when he's literally known as the god of mischief? That's like dating someone who tells you they're gonna cheat on you and then you get mad when they cheat on you. Making a deal with Loki is like making a deal with the devil, but everyone in the MCU was doing it until Thanos stabbed Loki. Now no one can trust him other than those he interacts with on his Disney Plus show. Think about it, Loki was the one who manipulated his brother to go to war with the Frost Giants in the first Thor movie, so he could get all the glory of killing their king. Thanos trusted Loki to get the job done and even gave him an Infinity Stone in the hopes he'd bring another one back, but they stayed on Earth. Loki has even faked his own death on multiple occasions and came back disguised as Thor's father, Odin. So how could anyone actually trust this guy? Bad move.
No. Thank you.
And those are some of the times our favorite MCU characters realize they made a huge mistake. Do you agree with our list? Are there any big mistakes we may have missed? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more MCU videos. Thanks for watching.